I'm on a bit of a roll today. I've just come across a lot of stories that are talk-worthy. Let me put it that way. So I'm just going to read this one out. I'm just going to get straight into it. I'll just read it out. It's from the BBC. It's not very long, so I'll just read it out. And then, as is often the case, give my take on it. So this report is by... just find the name of the reporter. Doesn't say, actually. Oh, doesn't say the reporter, but anyway, Roy Chubby Brown, Sheffield cancellation supported by council. A council leader has said his authority wholeheartedly supports the venue's decision to cancel a show by comedian Roy Chubby Brown. The Goggle Sporting stand-up was due to appear at Sheffield City Hall next year, but the performance was axed. Terry Fox told a city council meeting the humorous material did not reflect our city's values. An online petition calling for the event to be reinstated has accrued more than 32,000 signatures. Just to put that in context, Sheffield has about 550,000 people. I'm just putting it out there as a matter of context. Sheffield City Trust, which is mainly funded by the council, cancelled the show over concerns about racism, homophobia, and sexism by the Middlesbrough-born stand-up. It said it had issued refunds to 300 ticket holders due to attend the gig at the 2,373 capacity Oval Hall room. At an earlier council meeting, Liberal Democrat councillor Shafak Mohammed said the decision smacks of the nanny state. He also asked if the council had been consulted and whether Brown, real name Royston Basie, was banned from Sheffield according to the local democracy reporting service. In the written reply, Mr Fox said the council was not consulted but asked to support the trust's decision, and we gave that support. Brown's show was at a council-supported venue using public money, he added. Mr Fox and the 76-year-old comic who lives in Lincolnshire was not banned from Sheffield, and if an event was at an independent venue, it would be for that venue to decide whether to put it on. The leader of the City Council's Labour group added that he recognised the strength of feeling this has stirred up and that some would be disappointed with the Trust's decision and with the Council for supporting it. Brown had previously waded into the row himself with a lengthy Facebook post blaming those in authority and not the good people of Sheffield for the ban. The comedian has previously been embroiled in controversy over shows and venues in Swansea, Nottingham and other towns have cancelled his appearances. Critics of the Sheffield decision planned protests outside the City Hall later in the week. Okay, there's a number of things to look at with this, and one of the most obvious is the issue of freedom of expression. Now, let me just put my cards on the table. I don't like Roy Chubby Brown. I've never got a good vibe from him. I don't like that kind of comedy in general. Another character I've no time for is Frankie Boyle. I have no respect for comics who use, for example, the suffering and the trauma of others as part of their act. Now, Roy Chubby Brown has done that. In 1985, hours, I'm not talking days or weeks, hours, after the Bradford City farm with 56 people were burned to death or suffered smoke inhalation, Brown basically said no one invited me to the barbecue. And this is basically his vein of humour. It's very blunt, very raw. That's what it's about. Certainly, there's the old boorish, sexist, homophobic, racist jokes that really are left over of the 70s. Now, I am not politically correct. I am not woke, but I do have a degree of values, and I think that using pain as part of a humour act is it's cheap. I think it's callous. And I think the people who defend Roy Chubby Brown, I'm not talking about those who defend free speech, but I'm talking about those who actually like him and like his act. I think the same people would say that bullying is just banter. I think it's a certain mindset that I find very hard to respect. That's my cards on the table. I don't like the guy. I do not like that sort of humor. Um, I would describe my humor as certainly not square. I can appreciate a certain degree of risque. I can appreciate a certain edge, but I do think that there are some limits, and I think using tragedy or suffering. I'm not saying it's totally off bounds, but I think that it's a case of, well, taste really. Um, but here's the thing about comedy, it is a subjective thing. So what I'm saying is tasteless. Another person might say, "Oh well, it's just cutting edge." Now, regarding this decision by the council, it's important to recognise that the venue is council property, so it's not an independent venue. Therefore, they have jurisdiction on that. And if people were to complain, they would have to answer to that. But everything I've said about Roy Chubby Brown and that sort of act, I still am not entirely sure that censorship is the right answer. That's what it is. There's no way around it. That's what it is. Um, I do have one question, and I didn't see it in the report. On television, we have the watershed. I'm not sure how rigidly that's enforced these days, but it's this long-standing idea that taboo or adult material should only be shown after 9 p.m., i.e., explicit swear words, violence, sex, right? Adult material. Now, maybe it should be the same case with comedy acts, i.e., if he would have performed publicly, then, if it's because I've heard people say, well, if you don't like the act, don't go. That's all, that's fine. But if it's kind of in a public venue, I mean, if it's a closed off space and it's like you can only enter if you've got a ticket, I think that's a different matter. But if it's kind of like, say, the Edinburgh Fringe, I'm not sure that it is. According to this, it seems to be within a building venue. But if it was like the Edinburgh Fringe, then it would be in public, literally, and anyone could hear it. Um, and part of me thinks, is it really appropriate to have that sort of boorish humor in a modern British city in that sense? I don't know. I don't know. But I am uneasy about censorship, even for the likes of Roy Chubby Brown. However, I will say this, and it's something that is sometimes overlooked in the free speech debate, because defenders of Roy Chubby Brown and those sort of comics say, well, what about free speech? What they're forgetting is critics have the free speech to criticize. I don't really accept this line that, oh, if you don't like it, don't go. Well, if they've heard that humor, whether from clips or whatever, yeah, you could say you don't need to listen to it, but you cannot say you're not allowed to criticize this person because it's their freedom of speech to criticize them. If I want to say that I think Roy Chubby Brown is unfunny, boorish, callous creep, that's my freedom of speech. And their freedom of speech should be say, oh no, he's not, he's funny. Okay, so if you're going to talk about freedom of speech, then be prepared to defend it across the board, including defending the opinion that you don't like. Um, so I'm not sure about censoring him. I think that probably is not a good idea, simply because where do you draw a line? How much is censored? Anything that could be deemed offensive might be censored. Then I just think it just martyrizes him, and I don't think he deserves it. I think he's a creep, and I don't think he deserves to be martyrized in that way. Um, I will say this, so on the subject of comedy, for those who just sort of say it's just humor, it's just a joke, let me put it this way. Imagine you had lost a loved one in the Bradford City fire, and you heard Roy Chubby Brown come out with that joke that he made hours after that. And that's just one example. It's not like I'm just digging up the past because this is consistent with his sort of humor. Now, would you really be, oh, just seeing the sense of humor? I think you would be pretty pissed off. Put it this way, if someone I cared about was used by some comedian as part of their act and thousands of people were laughing at it, I would be hurt. I would be very angry. Um, I think it's a cheap, cowardly trick that some comedians use, and not just in stand-up. Seth MacFarlane's used it in Family Guy. I think one episode that was particularly in bad taste was the Shivo case, which in the United States was a high-profile euthanasia case from, I believe it was 2006. And the thing is, the episode wasn't satirical, it wasn't clever, it was just, I've seen it, I just thought it was just in bad taste. Um, it was exploitative, it was mean-spirited, I don't think it was intelligent. Um, I think it is, that sort of humor to me is like schoolyard bully humor. It's like picking on the fat kid or the kid with glasses or whatever. In that sense, it's just, there's a nasty streak to it. So my feelings are sort of mixed between, on one hand, I dislike callousness, I dislike bullies, and I happen to believe that comics who use others' pain and suffering have a nasty bullying streak to them. On the other hand, I'm not a totalitarian, I'm against censorship. Well, I'm broadly against censorship. The only circumstances I would say censorship does have a place, and this is something to think about, and it's something for those who say they're against all censorship. Well, let's say there is child porn, right? Let's say a predator downloaded child porn. Should that sort of material not be censored? Should terrorist material not be censored? It's kind of a libertarian argument to say absolutely nothing should be censored. Like anything goes. Um, I think if something causes harm to the public, i.e., child porn, for obvious reasons, because it's exploiting the suffering of children and it enables predators, I think that should be curtailed. I mean, I can't think of many people who would try to argue free speech on that one, although it's actually acts as opposed to speech. Okay, well, let's look at it in terms of the speech. Let's say you have Islamic State. One of their spokespeople was to go on the YouTube and basically justify suicide bombing. Now, many victims of terrorism would find that grossly, grossly offensive. Um, should it be censored? I happen to think it should. I don't think terrorists deserve a voice if they're going to slaughter innocent people. As far as I'm concerned, they've lost their right to free speech when they have slaughtered innocent people. So that's all I would say. Um, I I'm trying to look at this away from my personal bias against Roy Chubby Brown, the fact I don't like the guy. And I'm saying that if he's censored, then it sort of opens up a whole thing whereby maybe you have a left wing comic, for example, who takes pot shots at conservatives, and that might be deemed offensive. Um, so has to be consistent at least. And the other reason I'm against it is because I don't think he deserves to become a martyr of free speech. I don't think. I think he's a creep. I don't think he deserves to be a martyr of free speech. But that's what will happen. So the fact 32,000 people have signed the petition, even in a city of 500,000, it's a relatively small proportion, but still a lot of people. So that demonstrates the strength of feeling. Now, had his show just went ahead, it probably would have had, well, what was the capacity? 2,000? So in that sense, it's probably generated more attention for him. In that sense, it's sort of counterproductive. Let me know your thoughts. Summed up, I'm not all for censoring controversial comics, but I reject the argument, oh, you should just find the sense of humor. Freedom of speech means that people also have a right to criticise. This is something that's lost. People think freedom of speech means they get to be obnoxious and people can't challenge them. Freedom of speech also means people have the right to challenge. That's my take. Let me know your thoughts.